I think too much of our country spends their time in the sympathetic nervous system, right? They're just always in this fight or flight. I'm late to pick up the kids. Dinner's not done. I didn't finish my work. The phone is ringing. We're just overstimulated. What it is, did I just see the average person is hit with 65,000 marketing messages per day.
Wow.
And just in everything from banner ads on your computer to your cell phone to billboards to TV to radio to you name it. We're just inundated with things, and to be able to cut that out of the world for 10 minutes and have to focus on something else is huge.
That's brilliant. Yeah. This is so important. And if those of you don't know, if you're living in that state, I'll describe it as it sometimes feels like you've had caffeine, but you haven't. It's like this, you can literally feel like you took something, or it feels like you're in this hyper state of a stimulant state, but you haven't taken a stimulant to make you feel that way. That is literally, you're in that parasympathetic, you're in that place that you don't want to be.
100%. Yeah. And it's a terrible place to feel like you are. The idea that you feel like you're stressed out and you can't even identify why. And you mentioned earlier in your conversation about cortisol levels, for instance, and it's like cortisol is a way that your body tries to fight that. And then cortisol leads to weight gain. Cortisol leads to abdominal bloating. Multiple other stress factors are crushing other areas of your body, but that oxidative stress is happening while you are in that sympathetic nervous system. Cleanup takes place in the parasympathetic.
Yeah. So I said the wrong thing. So let me correct myself a minute ago. I just said parasympathetic, but that's where you want to be. So the sympathetic is what I meant.
Correct.
When we feel that's the sympathetic. That's where you don't want to be.
Correct. Parasympathetic is, what do they call it? The relax and digest kind of mode. But when you go into that sympathetic nervous system, and by the way, a lot of this happens, and I'll say when we're dealing with people who are in that, age range of you and me and people even, older than us and whatnot, it's like when you're living in that sympathetic nervous system, so many things happen. Your digestion is slowing, which means it's obviously leading to more weight gain. You're dealing with, that's where you're going to end up with issues with insulin resistance. That's where you deal with issues like sexual dysfunction, because literally when your sympathetic nervous system is triggered, your body's physiological response to that stress environment is to shut everything down, because the only thing that matters right now is survival.
Wow.
And literally, think of it as that caveman response to a lion just, showed up out of the jungle. And again, not that I'm into the caveman metaphors, but the reality is that sympathetic nervous system response is literally like the only thing that matters right now is survival. And if anybody in your audience has ever lived a life that felt like you just survived every day, it's that Maslow's hierarchy, right? Like none of the things at the top of the pyramid matter because I'm just trying to make it through life.
Totally.
Today. Like paying the bills is in and of itself the biggest thing I can deal with right now. But the body's ability and the mind's ability equally to be able to switch from that sympathetic to parasympathetic response. There are moments to be in sympathetic. When you're at
like
the gym,
your grandkid or your kid falls in a pool, you've got to be in that to jump in. Like you have an accident. Like there's times that we need that, but not all day long.
Absolutely. When I'm at the gym, I do HIIT training is my gym of choice. And it's like one of the things I love about HIIT training is that I for 2 minutes force my body to do things that are unnatural by either lifting heavy things or sprinting or pushing or pulling or doing whatever we do at HIIT gyms. And then you get a 30 seconds of nothing.
Yeah.
Like the 30 seconds of nothing is enough to go like, okay, we just stressed, now parasympathetic. Oh, now I've got to go lift. 2 minutes of sympathetic, back to parasympathetic. And what people don't necessarily realize, especially in the gym community, because it's all about, muscle and fitness, the reality is the brain response that your body's getting out of that hormonal shift that's taking place and that vagal conditioning that's taking place while I'm at the gym. Just going into the gym stressed and going sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic, and bouncing back and forth from that nervous system response. When by the time I leave the gym, I'm just in a good place.
Yes.
Because I've conditioned my body to know how to go back to normal.
Yes. But warning on that for the people that are in that high stress, always running in the wrong state. When you bring your cell phone into the gym or you're not giving your body that, so if you 100%. Do a set and then you pick up your cell phone and you freak out about an email, you're constantly staying in the wrong state. So absolutely. I just want to point that out because I think a lot of people, they put in the motion, like they're like, I'm doing this, but they're doing fully what you're saying, like create the tension, relax, create the tension, relax.
100%. And it's one of the beauties, not to get too far off topic on that, but like I go to a gym down here in the Miami area and they call it partner interval training. And I don't think they even realize the genius of what they're doing to the extent that I look at it, because just different eyes. It's that 2 minutes on, 30 seconds off kind of mindset. Like my phone stays away from me while I'm working out. Like I don't need anything else to happen there. And quite frankly, I'm not pretty enough to get pictures while I'm working. So the reality is like the phone stays away. But the fact that they have you work out with a partner at every station you're moving to throughout the workout, that type of camaraderie increases parasympathetic response, because there's actual human relationship that's taking place. You're talking with somebody, you're endorphin rushing because you're high-fiving each other on a great job those last 2 minutes. You're motivating each other through that. And that motivation itself leads to endorphin responses.
Yes.
I mean, you're getting oxytocin push. You're getting these types of things are taking place in the relational standing, not just the workout standing. So it's push hard, then take a break, push hard, take a break. And it's leading to vagal tone outside of just building muscle. And the relational aspect, I think they look at it from a camaraderie standpoint, that it increases membership when people have friends at the gym.
Super smart.
But friends at the gym are actually creating a better parasympathetic response. Like it's brilliant.
Well, you single-handedly just now got me to not have my phone in the gym ever again, because now I'm hearing now I just connected the dots on what I was missing in the gap. So I know I'm not alone on this. Other people are doing this too, because I had not really thought through. I understood what you were saying logically, but I'm now thinking, you can work out as hard as you think you're working, but if you're constantly not letting yourself get into that recover state, you're not getting these full benefits there. So that's pretty wild. You're dropping lots of knowledge bombs, especially the HRV and all this. Okay. So with so with the isometric exercise, the biggest issue I think that there is that you don't have that biofeedback. You don't know that you're actually doing it. Like you just said, like a trainer, unless they're sitting there, prodding you and saying, get back straight, like you're not actually doing it. So what Zona figured out was a way to give you that biofeedback, which forces you to be able to do this without even having to go to the gym. Can you explain how that works?
Well, there's a whole nother layer of physiology I want to get into here as well that we didn't. And that is Zona is an isometric hand grip exercise device. And I know you've got one, and I don't know if your audience is watching, they can see the one that I'm holding up on the screen here.
Got it right here.
Very much looks like that Star Trek phaser, the barcode scanner. We get all of this kind of feedback. And what Zona does is it actually uses hand grip strength to do that. Now, it's not a grip strainer. So a lot of people are like, oh, it makes your hand grip stronger. I'm like, well, eventually that will be a byproduct. But what it's really doing is having we calibrate at the start of each session to your maximum voluntary contraction. And then an algorithm in the device actually decides what the best contraction is for you if you're at a percentage of maximum voluntary contraction. And then as you hold it for those 2 minutes, same as that plank as we discussed earlier, we kind of unpacked all this. Now I just need to connect the dots. 30 seconds in, you're like, no big deal. 1 minute in, you're like, I wonder how far I am. A minute and a half in, you're like, wow, is this over yet? And then 2 minutes in, you're kind of shaking your hand a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, that was more uncomfortable than I thought it was. But then the device is going to make you take a 1 minute break. Why is it making you take a 1 minute break? Because it forced you into a sympathetic nervous system, and now it needs you to decompress. Okay. Then you're going to do it on your left hand, and you're going to do it again. You're going to do it 2 times. Two on the right, 2 on the left, for just about 10, 11 minutes worth of workout. It's not the end of the world.
And you can't cheat because it beeps at you.
Correct. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you the biofeedback, as you mentioned, that are actually telling you that you're squeezing it too hard, you're not squeezing it enough. It's going to give you visual feedback and so on, because it's no different than the trainer sitting over you prodding when your plank isn't correct.
Except you can't fire it because it's you've already bought it and it's in your hand.
True. Also true. So you're going to continue to use the device in that way, and it's going to keep you in an optimal range to make sure that your isometric exercise was positive. Now, it's giving you the nitric oxide release. That's obviously happening because you're getting that release because you're flipping into the sympathetic nervous system, as we discussed. You're also getting the benefits of the isometric exercise because you're holding it in there for 2 minutes with biofeedback, keeping you in the right range. What's interesting, and this is where I say that Zona is the ultimate biohack, is that there's a layer of physiology that's taking place beneath this. And we talk talked earlier about the flexibility of the cardiovascular system and how that flexibility of the cardiovascular system is a huge benefit, if you will, because that's what stops the blood from being constricted, is the widening of those blood vessels. We also draw a parallel to the dried sponge. Remember, we talked about how the blood vessels should be like a moist sponge that is flexible, but over time they end up drying and it's like a brittle sponge. The corner shot, or the combo shot to the corner pocket here for Zona, is that when your body ends up restricting a muscle group and using that isometric, so I'm holding my grip to a certain level and then I'm just having to hold it for a period of time, not only are we getting the nitric oxide response, but we're all familiar with how do we prevent cramping, right? Well, cramping, what do we tell people? Well, make sure that you're, electrolytes, right? Part of the reason behind that is because what ends up happening is that when a muscle is held at a static resistance for a period of time, it wants to cramp. It's going to want to cramp. Well, the only way that the body doesn't cramp is it actually releases sodium into the muscle, and the sodium that's being released in the muscle stops that muscle from spasming. Well, at a cellular level, sodium levels must always be equal to potassium levels in any cell in the body. There's always a sodium-potassium balance. Well, if the cell forces sodium in order to let the muscle not constrict, in order to keep those levels equal, it obviously has to also release potassium into the bloodstream. So both of them have to be released. As sodium is released to stop the spasm, potassium being released is kind of just a byproduct of sodium. It's just happening because the sodium is being released. But when potassium moves into the bloodstream, potassium is the only thing that makes that brittle sponge soft again.
Wow. Okay, so that makes sense.
Potassium is moving through, and that brittle sponge, of course, being the endothelial lining of the cardiovascular system. As potassium is moving through, potassium begins to soften that sponge all over again. Well, what's interesting is that when you were younger, you didn't have this problem because you had all of this stuff. You weren't born with a potassium deficiency, right? Like everything was there.
Right.
As you age, these things happen. Your cardiovascular system begins to harden a little bit, that arteriosclerosis, as we discussed. Potassium actually softens the endothelium, and the endothelium ends up being able to flex again like it used to. We're retraining the body. The functional medicine is nothing but reminding the body what it already knows how to do. When we end up doing that, we do end up with a more flexible cardiovascular system. I always use the phrase that we're literally reversing time because we're taking the cardiovascular system back to where it used to be. Now, the interesting thing about the endothelium is that it also functions as what I call the thermostat of the cardiovascular system. And that is, the endothelium is the regulatory instrument in the body that lets the brain know that blood pressure is high. When your endothelium begins to harden, your body literally loses its ability to know that it's experiencing high blood pressure. The body doesn't even know it.
Wow.
So the body doesn't respond to it because it doesn't even realize it. It lost its ability to sense high blood pressure. I say it's kind of like the equivalent of a thermostat, if you're familiar with that. And that is, the thermostat is what lets the furnace know that it's cold.
Yep.
Well, if your thermostat's broken, the heat's never going to turn on, and you're blaming the furnace. It's
right.
Well, it's not the furnace's fault. You got a thermostat problem. Your thermostat didn't know to tell the furnace to turn on, so the furnace never turned on, and now it's cold in the house. Same thing has happened with your cardiovascular system. Your blood pressures continue to increase and increase and increase over time. But the reason the blood pressures continue to increase is because your body didn't even know it was increasing.
Wow.
It literally lost its ability to self-regulate. So while we're doing all of these things that actually help the cardiovascular system, help it regulate, and so on, the most important thing that we're doing with this isometric exercise that is Zona is we're actually helping your body get back to just doing what it knows how to do. I mean, the body was built for survival.
Yeah.
There's nothing like, and when we introduce something to it that literally just takes it back to what it knows how to do, we don't need to introduce supplements. We don't need to introduce medication. We don't need to introduce all of these things. We just let the body do what the body knows how to do. It knows how to self-regulate if given the right environment.
So this makes so much sense. And what I love about it is it's just common sense. It is that, when I said earlier, like, you can treat symptoms, but if we can understand what's creating and go back behind, you've really addressed that. What I like specifically about this is when I first talked to Mark, I got the understanding of isometric. I never really understood how isometric was connected to heart until you explained that to me a few weeks ago when I talked to you. So that made a lot of sense to me. But what I then did, what a lot of you listening might try to do, I'm like, oh, I'll just go hold a plank perfect for 2 minutes, or I'll just go hold an L sit for 2 minutes. And then I realized, wait, I'm not actually doing that. Like, I might have have thought I was doing it, but I'm fidgeting or I'm moving around or I'm not in that true isometric hold. So what's cool about this, because I was that person that was like, well, I don't need a device. I'll just do it myself. But I'm telling you all, it's not as easy as you think. It's a lot harder than you think to do it yourself. So what's cool about this device is you can do it literally from anywhere. Like I could do it while I'm talking to him right now. I could do it while I'm watching TV. I could do it while you're doing it while you're emailing. I don't think I could do that, but you can do it. Like you just do it in your day. It's easy and it gives you exact feedback. So you don't have to go to a gym to do it. You don't have to, it just becomes part of your routine. And like really any contraindications or anyone that can't do this?
There isn't. You mentioned clinicals and stuff like that earlier. And what's brilliant about it is that isometrics and specifically Zona has been researched by everything from the Mayo Clinic, the Johns Hopkins University, Harvard Health Review, like you name it. Like we've got all the credentials behind what we've done here. And it's amazing that it's not a bigger conversation. Simply
especially because you blended allopathic like this is not just alternative or like you really this is Western medicine would agree with this too. This is like you've really bridged all the gaps. So it is why do you think it's not more talked about? Like why do you think people aren't having this conversation enough about it?
I'm going to hate that question because I'm going to sound like a monster when I give my answer. Why do I think that it is? I'm going to politely say the same reason I believe that the American Heart Association about 3 years ago decided to change the definition of hypertension from 120/80 to 110/72. And that is that change took place and it wasn't because people were fine one day and then they weren't the next. It really makes me question why all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of people were diagnosed with high blood pressure one afternoon and they weren't the day before.
Okay, so he can't say this, but I will. It comes down to money, I think. Yeah, it could allegedly come down to money. So it's the same. I mean, I could say the same thing about cholesterol and medications there. Like people are freaking out about numbers that we weren't concerned about years ago. So it's an interesting.
Absolutely. We'll let RFK say it all for us right now.
Yeah, I can't. Mark did not say it. We're going on the record. He didn't say it. Exactly. I allegedly said
it. And the truth of the matter is like, I'm not saying that everybody is cynical with it. We're in the midst right now. We have been for a little while going through FDA clinical trials because we believe in doing everything the right way. We're proud of the science we have. We're not trying to go in through the back door and tell people something that isn't accurate. Our science will uphold in front of anybody. So we've been in the midst of FDA clinical trials. The FDA has been amazing to work with in getting this through. And I believe under the, current health secretary that it's even going to be better. Because I think a lot of conversations that a lot of people have talked about for a long time have not been a topic of conversation nearly as much as they should have been. And I'm so excited to see where we're going right now. Since COVID, if I can say this, and that is there has been an awareness that seems to have permeated through people's minds, this idea that maybe the medical system doesn't have my best interest at heart, and maybe health insurance companies are not the people who make the best decisions as to what I need. That has actually been a permeating conversation throughout all of healthcare for the last, now 5 years, if you can believe it's been that long. It has been a nonstop conversation for those last 5 years. And I think, especially in the last month or so, we are noticing it becoming a topic of conversation even past that. And I'm excited to see what this leads to. I'm excited to see people realizing that their health, their blood pressure, their diabetes, or whatever it is they're dealing with, it is your responsibility. Because if my doctor fails, if my insurance company fails, if my government fails, ultimately, I'm the one that's paying the price.
That's exactly right.
So sitting around and waiting for someone else to make the decisions for me is never something that's going to happen in my world. And I strongly encourage it for anybody who's listening to this. Like, get out, do what it is that that could be better. And even if you don't completely understand, there's a lot of things that you've done in your life before you completely understood them. And when it comes to things like natural health and wellness, I say like, eat a donut, nobody cares, but eat something that's healthy and everybody turns into a scientist. And it's like, why? Like, why are we so suspicious of things that are good for us, but we are not even critical of the things that are bad for us?
No, it's wild. And I watch the programming happening on TV and just everything, it's just like to convince us otherwise. So it's just, we have to be very aware. And I shared at the beginning of this that my dad died at 49 of heart disease. Now he had very high blood pressure and he had high triglycerides. Those were his two things, not just high cholesterol. He had high triglycerides, like very high, like in the 800s, but his blood pressure was high. And instead of his doctor talking to him about any of the stuff that we've talked about today, like isometric exercises, or heck, even just going for a walk to distress, like any of it, what they did was here's blood pressure medicine. And he died. He literally died. So I'm not I know Mark's not telling you either to go off medication or not. You got to ask your doctor what's right for you. But what does it hurt? It's going to help to add in things like this. Like this is getting to the root. So it's not going to make it worse. So why not? Why would you gamble with medication, but not gamble with the preventative or gamble with the thing that's actually going to help at the root cause?
Well, I'm going to say this. This is a guided exercise. And if you're going to a doctor who's telling you not to exercise, you're going to the wrong doctor.
Yes, I agree. So this device, household now in our house, me and my husband, and then Mark's holding up. If you go to Zona, Zona.com, Zona.com/Natalie Jill, or if you just go to Zona.com, you can use coupon Natalie Jill just so you get a savings and everything. But this is really, your whole family can use it. You don't need one for everybody. Like you could share it. But it's really easy. Like you could do it while you're watching Netflix if you want. You could do it while you're doing it. You could do it at any time. It's just easy to do. It's the learning curve on it is just to be okay with the beep and it telling you that you're not doing it right. Because if you're a perfectionist, you're going to get that's what annoys you initially. Because you're like, I'm going to do this right. True. But you really do realize how we're not still. Because it like how we want to fidget and you want to move, right? That was my biggest struggle with it. Well, this was super eye-opening. You answered a lot of questions for me and you definitely closed the loop too with HRV concerns and phones in the gym. So thank you so much, Mark. This was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Natalie. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your viewers.